The Good Liars.
The Good Liars.
This is boring. We're boring.
I will die standing in my boots.
Herschel, I got you some condoms.
What made everyone so weird and sad that they had to come out here?
Don't smoke,
Mr. President, welcome to the show.
We are the Good Liars, and we are going to tell the truth. Trust us. Welcome to the Good Liars Tell the Truth. I am Jason Selvig.
And I'm DeVrom Stiefler.
And we're the Good Liars. And we may be the Good Liars, but on this show, we're going to tell you the truth. And today is going to be part 2 of our experience in D.C. for January 6th. A truly, truly unforgettable experience. We're going to find out, just where we'd rank it, on a 1 to 10 scale. It's very important to give a rating in this Rotten Tomatoes society that we live in. So let's get right into it. Here's part 2 of our experience on January 6th.
We are very excited to welcome our friend Yasmin Vossoughian, MSNBC anchor and correspondent, who was there on January 6th, who has her unique perspective on all the stuff we just talked about. Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
Yeah, we're happy to have you.
Let's just start. Let's just hit.
Yeah.
Anytime you want to come here and talk about January 6th, you will, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So from the day, January 6th, you were reporting there, and you made it all the way to the Capitol there. And when you think about it, just when somebody mentions January 6th, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
What's funny is actually I'm writing a piece right now because we're preparing for the coverage of the Jack Smith federal indictment case. And I've been working a lot on this piece about the January 6th timeline over the last week or so. And I had to reread the indictment all over again. And I actually thought it was so amazing to think about what was happening behind the scenes while we were all on the streets, awaiting this thing to go down, the phone calls that were being made by Rudy Giuliani in the early hours of January 6th to senators to ensure that they would stop the certification process, the phone call between Donald Trump and Mike Pence, in which Mike Pence was like, yeah, I can't do that. That's not constitutional.
Wild. It's crazy to think about Rudy Giuliani.
And Donald Trump calling him a wimp, that morning. All of this buildup, right? And then I believe it was John Eastman and Giuliani was the opening act. We knew at that point Rudy Giuliani was not doing well psychologically.
Right.
Because we had already seen Four Seasons landscaping. We had already seen all of these press conferences, right?
The dripping of the hair dye.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But now you look back and they were the opening act of Donald Trump with the ellipse. And I remember the crowds that were gathering, it was so insane. I couldn't believe how many people were there.
What time did you get there to the Capitol, just so we can kind of picture when this was all happening?
So I should probably look at the timestamp of my pictures, but Nancy Pelosi gavelled in at 1:03 p.m.
Okay,
to be exact, because I literally just reread the indictment. So Nancy Pelosi gavelled in at 1:03 p.m. in the afternoon to start the certification process. By 1:30, I think they had called recess because of what was happening outside. But I remember standing outside the Capitol and being like, guys, nothing's going to happen at this moment. It really doesn't seem too insane. Let's make our way over there so I can pee. I'm really cold. I need to we need to go find a Panera or whatever or something, or a Cozy or one of those sandwich shops. I just need to use the bathroom and warm my hands a little bit, and then we'll be right back. And then I remember looking down. I remember we looked at our phone, and then I remember looking up and being like, wait a minute, what is happening? And we saw people starting to hang from the scaffolding, because remember they were set up for the inauguration, which was so insane to me, because I'm like, oh my God, in 2 weeks, literally, then, candidate to be President Biden is going to be inaugurated, is going to be sworn in as the next president of the United States. And right now, protesters that would eventually become insurrectionists that would storm the Capitol are hanging from those risers where Bill Clinton will sit, where George W. Bush will sit, where secretaries of state will sit, former secretaries of state will sit. I mean, where Donald Trump did not sit on Inauguration Day.
Right. So you ran over to Cozy, and then by the time you got
I
back,
didn't go. So I did. By the time I came back,
oh, okay, that was enough for you not to go. To
So how was your chicken Caesar wrap?
Cozy,
Was it good?
And I came back, and Donald Trump was giving the message like, "We love you, go home." And I was like, "What did I miss?"
Yeah.
No. So we looked up and we saw them hanging from the like kind of scaffolding and people gathering at the front archway, and I'm like, "Oh, something's happening. We're not going to the bathroom." And long story short, I didn't end up going to the bathroom until like 11 o'clock that night or something when I made it back to my hotel room. But if anybody wanted to know about my bathroom tendencies on Breaking News days, but it was like, I mean, it was one of the most surreal experiences of my life. And I've served. I haven't served overseas. I'm not a veteran, but I've reported overseas in conflict zones. And, a lot of times people are like worried for your life. And I had never gotten so many like text messages and emails from people like, worried for my life and my safety. And what was so surreal was that I was in Washington, D.C., a place that I lived for many years as a reporter, a place that I called home.
Is this where you were? Was this where
wow,
you were kind of set up? We found this picture from the day, right? So you were really like just right there at the bottom of the Capitol steps. It's a great hat.
That was the good thing about masks, though, is like it kept you warm when you wore the mask. It like kept your face and nose and everything warm. It was actually kind of nice.
All of your own
and it also let everybody know who wasn't with them. Who wasn't on their side? So that was the bad part. That was convenient too, if you were media or a non-MAGA person.
I didn't wear any like insignia or anything to identify myself as a press person, besides the fact that I had a camera and two burly security men with me.
Did you experience? You heard this in our live show, I'm sure, but we had an experience where we walked along the side after they'd stormed the Capitol, and we got surrounded by Trump supporters because they saw that I had a microphone in my pocket and they were calling us fake news and making like they wanted to beat us up, basically. And luckily a flashbang went off and they turned around and we were able to get out of there. Did you experience anything like that where people were?
That's what I was going to say. No. I mean, I was talking to a lot of militia guys and like kind of trying to ingratiate myself to them. And I do it in a way where I'm like, oh, like, where are you from? And I love Florida. And
yeah,
but just like,
I have the same bulletproof
it's
vest.
Always
That's
Florida.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know. Like, I don't know why I got lucky. I don't know why. And in fact, not only did we get lucky, we talked to a lot of militia guys that were in the Capitol and then came out. I mean, I was like seeing guys coming out and pouring milk on their face because they've been tear gassed, wiping their eyes.
I remember we saw the guy who was later in a lot of photos on the Senate floor with a hole in his cheek because he'd been shot by a rubber bullet. That was our first sign that things had really gone off the rails.
Yeah, I mean, I at one point, one of these militia guys said to me, "We're coming back with our guns." And I remember saying that. I remember saying that on air, and I was like, this is what I'm being told. Like, they're coming back with guns. I'd mentioned this earlier when I was walking up Constitution Avenue, I was talking to a lot of people that were really angry, but that were like, very kind of innocuous, like normal people that you might like sit next to at a bar in a restaurant, meet when you're visiting your in-laws, your grandparents, like I remember talking to this older couple, very nice older couple. And I walked up Constitution Avenue with them, and they were convinced that it's on, Mike Pence, and he could justify, or he could not certify the election. And I said to them, that's not constitutionally possible, like that he cannot do that. And they said, well, it's on his responsibility. And then they kind of like started to get more agitated. But like, I was so amazed by the kind of diversity of people. And when I say diversity, I mean more age diversity and like socioeconomic diversity. I don't mean when it comes to race, there was not diversity in that regard as much, but like socioeconomic and age diversity that I saw amongst a lot of the like protesters and insurrectionists. That to me was pretty shocking and fascinating. And it was just amazing to me that it was happening in this country.
What information were you getting at that point? Like as the mob was storming the Capitol,
so,
did you get any of like this fake news misinformation from people?
Well, I mean, I think that there was. I think that there was. I mean, I think Trump did have a plan to go to the Capitol. He said he was going to, and we know that now because of all the interviews by the House investigation, and by the January 6th, and by the January 6th committee, and by Jack Smith. Like he had an intention of wanting to go, and then the Secret Service is like, "You're not going." So I think that there was like an idea or a moment in which we actually all thought that Donald Trump was going to go to the Capitol. But
well, how was that actually going to work? Was he going to take a motorcade there, or was he going to walk like he's on Selma Bridge and like walk down there like arm in arm?
Nobody
with like,
actually
what is
thought that. Well, but that's like in theme with his entire presidency.
Yeah,
you know
exactly.
I mean?
That seems like what he would think.
Right. Yeah.
Would happen.
Like I'll be there with you. I'll march in solidarity with you. Like I am you. You know, like I live how you live. I think how you think.
We are all billionaires.
This all from his golden throned.
Yeah. I don't want to touch you. I don't want to be near you. I don't want to touch your skin.
It's like, this is all in line with his. It's like it's all very typical and like and in line with his presidency. And so yeah. I mean, but what we do is we have a whole. I mean, first of all, we have a whole like news feed that's coming in through our phones. And when we don't have phone service, we had a WhatsApp group, which was actually for the most part coming through, and like I would get kind of messages or I would see other crews of mine that would say, hey, like, here's what's happening on the east side. Here's what's happening on the west side. And so that's kind of how I knew. But we had like a group where we would all kind of update, like, here's what's happening. Here's what we're seeing. Here's what we're seeing and that kind of thing. But it was like so in the moment. I mean, that was the news. Like we were the news.
What did you think about the 3 hours of silence from him after they stormed the Capitol? I felt like that said more than any words could.
It's funny. So
what was
again,
going
like
through your mind?
Going back to the indictment, it talks a lot about what he was doing in that time period. And much of what he was doing in that time period was he was watching. He was watching it all unfold. And he had people coming up to him repeatedly, people in his cabinet and his, people that he quote unquote trusted, saying, you got to get him, that you got to do something. He had people calling him. McCarthy called him from inside the Capitol saying, call them off. But by the way, McCarthy, who like has stood by him through and through after it all went down.
Visited him right afterwards.
Exactly. Right? What do I think about it? I think he wanted to show how many people loved him and show the world that people supported him. And it's not surprising. I mean, I did not expect Donald Trump to get up and call them off immediately. Like, it's just not in his DNA. It's not how he acts. He waited to the very end when he recognized like lives were being lost. And like, if it kept going, it would become even worse for him. There was a curfew at 6 p.m. at that point. And so he had
I remember
to
getting that on our phone. It was like,
exactly.
Like go inside. It was.
We were trying to leave DC.
I mean, he knew what was happening. And a part of him was like, SeaWorld, people love me. Right. And I think a part of him was also like, see, Donald, people love me. Like.
He's just like looking at himself in the mirror the whole time. Like, I'm good enough. I'm smart enough. And people
I think you're right.
That's the truth. Like, if anybody is to assess who Donald Trump is and how he acts, that is who he is, and in that, like, it's, it's kind of like this narcissistic narcissistic way about him, but also let's kind of this, how he needs this for his own kind of well-being and self-confidence, And so by seeing those people up there, he was telling himself that he was loved. He was telling himself that he was supported. And then he wanted to show the world that he was supported. And that's why he kept going. Like, it was purely about Donald, right? It was purely about Donald Trump on that day. And I think the surreal part too was like, I don't know if you guys experienced this, but at night when it was all over, it finally seemed like they were ready.
Ready for it to be over?
No, like ready for insurrectionists, like ready for them.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like the actual
cops.
Security force was prepared.
They were finally in place. Like,
that's great. They did get it together. So okay, that's good to know.
I remember talking to Rachel Maddow at one point. It was like 9:00 at night, and I was doing like one of my last live shots of the day, or 10, and I had like a lineup of National Guards troops I don't know what, and it was DC Metro and CPD and there were barricades and everything. And I was like, if only it looked like this 12 hours ago, maybe we wouldn't have experienced what we experienced. I mean, it was like the fact that, which was like a complete breakdown. And I think, they investigated it, but yes, what was the cause? So like, yes, okay, the investigation of the cause, right? Did Donald Trump incite an insurrection, driving thousands of people towards the Capitol? But then it's also like the security preparations that went into that seemed so ridiculous.
Wait, so you've researched this. I want to ask you about this because we've talked to a lot of Trump supporters. They blame January 6th on Nancy Pelosi. They literally say it's Nancy Pelosi's fault because they didn't have the National Guard. Explain to me why it's not true. So then I can now relay that information on. This is just interview prep for me right now, not as much part of this interview. I just need to know, why is it not Nancy Pelosi's fault that the National Guard wasn't ready to go there?
Well, first of all, the National Guard was called. They called in the National Guard, I believe, like around 1:30 or something like that. 1:30, the National Guard was called. An hour and a half later, they actually got greenlit for the National Guard to be deployed. An hour and a half after that is when the National Guard actually showed up. So it was, I think, like around 4:30.
It's like dark out now, and they get there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Donald Trump's message came in, I think around 4:45 or something, when the National Guard actually showed up. So it was 3 hours for when they were actually, from the time in which they were like asked to come, which was minutes literally after Nancy Pelosi gavelled in, to when they showed up was like 3+ hours that the National Guard actually took.
And why is that? Because we were in DC the night before, and I remember walking down the street and seeing a school bus full of National Guard. And I don't think they had weapons. I don't think they were armed, but they were National Guard in a white bus.
The National Guard doesn't have jurisdiction over the Capitol. Like, there's CPD, Capitol Police, then there's DC Metro Police, then there's the National Guard. So like, they don't actually have jurisdiction. And on a normal January 6th or a normal, day of certification process, the CPD has no problem keeping the Capitol secure, unless there was like indication of major security threats, which we now know there was like some chatter of security threats if people were like farming a lot of these, dark places of the internet or the dark web. Right. And we now know that in retrospect. I mean, I know that we as an organization.
If you walk around on January 5th, you see militia guys walking around with bulletproof vests. Is that not intelligence right there? Seeing that there are actual like militia members in DC for that?
Washington is all bureaucracy. Right. And there's like a chain of command. And it wasn't Nancy Pelosi did not like halt the chain of command for the National Guard to not come through. Like that is absolutely false.
I guess I'm more like, why didn't somebody who saw all these militia guys and Proud Boys who were there since maybe even the day before?
Well, but the thing is, that may have happened. There may have been like a conversation, but like there is a chain of command. There is a process that Washington does not veer from. But the other thing I will say, and this is a discussion that was had like multiple times and on public stage when they looked into the security failures was like the CPD was completely ill prepared, right? Like the CPD didn't have enough men on the ground. They didn't have enough like security in place. They didn't have enough barricades in place. And there were threats. They knew the threats, right? And there had been threats before and it hadn't followed through. That was on them, right? So I think like there was like, there's been multiple like, there's been multiple kind of discussions about who caused, right? So like, did Donald Trump incite the insurrection? Was he the reason everybody marched in the Capitol and invaded the Capitol and got inside and all this stuff? And then there's okay, but why wasn't it protected, right? Why weren't people prepared? And those have been two, I think, big conversations and investigations since the January 6th insurrection. Like, no doubt, the next time that time that a president or an election is certified, just watch the security. I mean, because we've seen it since then. Every time there's any kind of Capitol, and like any kind of thing happening at the Capitol, they have like, trucks and tanks and everything lined up and barricades put up. I mean, now they've gone overboard, but it always happens this way. It's like they get ill prepared. They're ill prepared. Something terrible happens like this, and then they go overboard in the other direction.
If people come somewhere dressed in military fatigues and bulletproof vests and helmets, and they are not military, police, or anything like that, doesn't matter their color, their skin, that is a warning sign. I wish that people just like took it seriously, because it seems so obvious to us being there. Like, these are people that want to protect themselves from getting hurt because they're going to beat people up right now.
The president knew, according to the indictment, the president knew that people were armed because
they got rid of the mags, right? They didn't want the mags.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but early before his speech on the ellipse, his team came to him and said, there are people here, that are in Washington, that are here to support you. They're wanting to attend this rally. And there are a lot of people that are armed. So he had been told that there was munitions in the crowd, that there were guns in the crowd. There were people that had come armed and ready to fight. And that was early in the day. So like, you combine that and, I mean, if you read that indictment, it kind of like reads like a story, because you combine that with then what he started to watch unfold, and then how long it took to call them off, and then how he called them off, knowing kind of what they came to do, right? I mean, why would you come with arms? Like, why would you come with it? It like takes you back to like, and that's why I mentioned like the militiamen in the beginning. Like, these are people, a lot of the mentality, which you guys well know, like the mentality and like, and the way, the thinking of like some militia guys are like based on like the origins of the Constitution, which is like, we own guns to protect our property, right? Our family, our lives against the government, right? Like, and that's exactly the type of mentality that they brought on January 6th.
And it's all because he couldn't deal with being a loser. That's it. Couldn't deal with the fact that he was a big loser, and then he just caused all that pain and suffering and got people killed because he lost.
The amazing thing is, it just doesn't stop. Sometimes I'm like, are we the ones that are going great? Like,
I had that thought today about him. I'm like, am I
it's him.
Am I out of touch with reality, or is it just half the country is totally
But the amazing thing is, like, I think also something that I think about all the time, like now I'm getting all existential on you guys and I'm totally sober.
No, it's good.
But like,
it's good.
But like,
yeah, we popped an edible.
You showed up to this totally sober?
You didn't get the memo? Oh, we are tripping balls right now.
Bombed, yeah.
Is like, with the framing of the Constitution, right? Like, there's so many like loopholes that Donald Trump has figured out. And, you have all these like constitutional originalists that are like big Trump supporters, right? Like, they wear like their 1776 hats, and they like, a lot of them were at the Capitol.
They stormed the Capitol.
Yeah,
they love this country.
But like, you think back, they talk a lot about the founding fathers. It's like, the founding fathers never, like, there were so many things that they didn't write into the Constitution because they never thought the electorate would vote in to the White House someone like Donald Trump.
And if you saw this person incite an insurrection, that certainly they wouldn't be on the ballot and the favorite to win the next election.
Yeah.
I guess that was my point, is that some of these things that would seem based on reason to be obvious, but he's found these, I guess, loopholes. He's getting away with it. It seems like as much as humanly possible.
So right now I'm also
relentless.
doing a piece on who stood up to Donald, like who kept him from decertifying the election, right? Like the Bill Barrs who walked in the room were like, at the final moment, and was like, you're wrong. The Chris Krebs, who was the head of election security, essentially, and he was like, the election was safe and secure, and then Donald Trump fired him. Brad Raffensperger, Georgia Secretary of State, who was like, can't find you those 11,000 plus votes. You're wrong. Like all of these people, like in Arizona, all these people across the country, Republicans, many of them Republicans, they were the ones that made sure our election was certified. They were the ones that made sure Joe Biden became the rightful president, because that's who won the election. If it were not for those individuals, if Raffensperger had decided not to do what he did and to listen to Donald Trump, if Governor Kemp had decided that Donald Trump was right and decided to believe the lie, like if Georgia Secretary of State, if all these people, like we could have been in a much different situation. But like because of
what
these
a big
people,
party of enablers, and then a couple of them that had to.
But like because
stand up
of
at
these
the end,
people, because of the Mike Pences of the world, at the end of the day, these people who believe in the rule of law and the actual Constitution were the ones that saved the day. And if those people aren't in place, it could go in a completely different direction. So it actually really wasn't the system. I mean, part of it was the system, but it was the people, which I think is amazing.
So when Donald Trump wins in a landslide this year, and we're talking about all these people that were so courageous, you're writing these articles on them. You're basically just giving them a blueprint for who to arrest when he's elected.
If Donald
these
Trump
are the 8 people.
I mean, like, I'm sure he has got a list, and he's just gonna like.
Why, he doesn't seem vindictive. I don't see it. He doesn't have a list.
I mean, I don't know how much, it's going to be, he's got a long list. But can I tell you can I tell you a funny thing that happened to me on TV once? It's a funny story.
Sure.
Yes.
That's
please.
off of the January 6th subject matter.
Yes, we'll allow it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So years ago, I was on CNN Headline News. So HLN, if you remember, there was a network called HLN that they shut down a couple years ago. And I was an anchor of a show called The Daily Share. And the whole like idea of The Daily Share was to try and make a transition to like more, honestly, streaming stuff. Like they were a little bit ahead of their time, but they wanted like YouTube stars on and like people that were making a name for themselves on Instagram and YouTube and TikTok. I don't know if TikTok was even going then, but that were making a name for themselves online. And Edward Snowden, the whole stuff had just gone out with Edward Snowden, and we were going to have a guest on to talk about it. And someone was booked as like an expert or something. And you would think that if someone has a handle at fart, they might have different intentions. So our booking team booked at fart to be an expert or a commentator on Ed Snowden. And so I was early on in my anchoring career, and I had like my IFB in my ear, which is like the earpiece that goes in your ear so you can like hear your interviewer. And you usually have someone, either a line producer or an executive producer, telling you like 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute, rap. And for some reason, there was like a lot going on in my ear that day. I don't know if there was something going on in the control room or whatever, but I could barely hear the person I was interviewing. And I would be asking him questions. And then she would be talking to me in my ear while he was answering the questions. And then suddenly I heard scissor hands. And I'm like, scissor hands? But I was like, what about, okay. And so I asked him like one more question. And then I like rapped. And then I'm like, okay, we got to go. And so I like wrapped the segment and we go off air. And then I go down to my office and I'm like, what the fuck was that? And then my boss comes in my office like later on. He's like, what the hell happened? I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, have you looked online? I'm like, what? He's like, it's gone viral. I'm like, what's gone viral? He's like, you just interviewed someone about Edward Scissorhands.
Not Ed Snowden, Edward Scissorhands.
And the whole time he was talking about he had the long nails and he made these like, sculptures.
This is at Fart. If anybody needs to find him, this is at Fart.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Sounds like a good prank, to be honest. One that we'd be envious of.
Oh my gosh. I thought my career, I was like, I'm done. I'm over. It's over. I'm over. I drank like an entire bottle of wine that night. I was like, it's over.
Oh, but it's not over. So
but it's not over.
In your ear, you were trying to push through and you were getting the questions in your ear. You couldn't hear.
I have the questions on my paper, but what happens is, I mean, you guys have heard in your ear, they'll be like rap, right? They'll tell you rap, right? When you're guests on, when you're a guest on my show. But they were like talking to my ear. So like whenever he would answer, I couldn't hear his answers. And so like, I was trusting that they were in the control room, like, and they would have said to me, like, "Yeah, this guy's a joke. Like, get out."
Right.
So finally, I just wrapped it because I was like very confused.
At Fart is completely an unreliable guest. It turns out
this stinks. Fart stinks.
That was like a really terrible TV moment.
Can I share
that?
Can I share one that I had as well?
Yeah.
I was on MSNBC and I was talking with DeVrom and another host. And I tried to do a symbol like I'm crossing my fingers.
With me.
Yeah. And it looks like I'm flicking off the camera to end a great segment. I end it just by like flicking off the camera at the end of it. And I'm like so sincere, like, oh yeah, everything's good. And then we get a text from you being like, did you just flick me off? And then like whoever like the producer was like, hey man, what was going on at the end there? And I was like, I did realize it as it was happening, like, oh my God, I'm
it's
flicking
like you have
off
to be like, make
camera.
Sure this one is like real
It doesn't make, I don't know.
That was a learning moment, right? I mean,
this would have been the way to do it.
Next time you'll get it just right. Do you remember how that moment unfolded?
You have to exaggerate your, like, everything needs to be a little bit more exaggerated.
Well, I think this is actually a full circle moment here because I think we were talking about, it was the DC arraignment, and I think we were talking about how we hope there isn't going to be more violence with Donald Trump because of January 6th, and we talk about January 6th. And then I was like, yep, I'm fingers crossed it doesn't happen. And it's just, I'm flicking off the camera.
Instead, you were like, F you. Yeah. I don't care.
Yeah.
Go fuck yourself. Thanks for having me on. I was like, in my mind, it was playing in my mind like, this has been the long con to like get a childish prank in here, and then they wait till like the 12th time they're on, and Jason's just flicking off the camera at the end of it. So I apologize for that again. I did feel bad. As if I do something funny, I want to know I'm doing something funny.
Do you guys have a are you guys going to the are you going to any of the primaries, or are you not going because it's just not really a primary anymore?
We went to Iowa. I mean, DeVrom, gave the
New Hampshire
participation trophy, and we went to New Hampshire as well.
To DeSantis. That's right. I saw that.
So, yes, and
we'll see. It's a much less wide open, fun state of affairs as you just
it's like
referenced.
It's over.
It's just like
it's over.
It's over. And
what, did you get ushered off by DeSantis' security when you did that?
Yeah, that was a lot of. He had a ton of security there. So I was kind of surprised I was able to walk up to him, but he had definitely some private security, also like the cops, and I don't know, there were probably like 10, 12 security guys in the room and right outside. So I got a lot more time than I thought I would. I'll say that.
His wife seemed jazzed at first. She was like, oh,
yeah,
cool.
That's so fun.
Yeah. A little award for her husband, who she bosses around all the time.
And then they were like, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah, the funniest part was DeVrom did his thing, and I see him on the way out, and then I'm going in. And I go and I stand next to them for a little bit. And then I try and do a thing. And DeVrom's, it's up. Like, you're not going to get away with anything now. DeVrom just did this big thing. And I say one word, and a guy just grabs me by the hood of my coat and just yanks me as hard as he can. Like I'm like a cartoon character going backwards. It was fun times in Atlantic, Iowa.
Do that. I do not have the courage to do something. I would not. That is,
Oh,
yeah.
you should do it. You should interrupt some politicians.
Should I though?
You should do
I?
it.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. I'll just have to
Yes.
find a new house and new job and all that good stuff. But
Yes.
I'll do
Yes.
it. Why not?
Yeah, why not? All right, we're going to wrap it up here. If there is anything you want to plug or anything, please put it on. We're going to have an audience of at least my mom. My dad definitely won't be listening, but
At Yasmin V on X and at Yasmin Vossoughian on Instagram. I'll say it because I'm the TV person. Thank you for having me on.
all right,
Boom.
thanks for
Just
coming
like
on.
that.
Nailed it. And I want to say
Nailed it.
thank you so much for coming on. I really, really appreciate it.